The Scott Jennings Show is proudly sponsored by Lear Capital. Since 1997, Lear has helped Americans protect their retirement accounts and savings with physical gold and silver. With thousands of five-star reviews and $3 billion in transactions, Lear is who I trust to help me buy gold and silver. Visit LearScott.com.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
President Trump descends on Kentucky and wades into a hot congressional primary. Iran's Navy is destroyed, and we're awaiting the world's largest ever oil reserve release. We'll have the latest on Epic Fury. Core inflation hit its lowest number in 5 years. We have the stats. And the left is losing its mind over steak and lobster for the troops. It is Wednesday, March the 12th. Common sense for the American people. This is Scott Jennings here on Salem. We broadcast live today from our nation's capital, and we begin with the news. President Trump landed in Kentucky last night, smack dab in the middle of one of the hottest congressional primaries in America. This is the 4th congressional district of Kentucky, represented by Thomas Massie, who has become a thorn in the president's side on a number of issues. The latest is the war, where Massie has opposed the president taking on the Iranian terror regime, and he has voted with the Democrats and the squad against the president's war powers. But this feud started long before, with Massie time and again opposing the president's agenda and attracting the commander-in-chief's ire. Here's what the president had to say about it last night in Cut 13.
We got to get rid of this loser. This guy is bad. He's disloyal to the Republican Party. He's disloyal to the people of Kentucky. And most importantly, he is disloyal to the United States of America. And he's got to be voted out of office as soon as possible.
Unsubtle words from the president about Massie. Now, the president here has endorsed an opponent for Massie, a veteran and a farmer named Ed Galrine, who also appeared at the rally in northern Kentucky last night. Here's Galrine in Cut 14.
I hope the fake news gets this. Tom Massie stands with the ladies of The View. Tom Massie stands with the ladies of The View. Mr. President, we stand with you. Fight, fight, fight! USA! USA!
Now, our sources tell us this race is close, very close. Millions of dollars have been spent so far on both sides, and more is on the way, a lot more. I want you to listen to this latest ad running across the district from the Republican Jewish Coalition, assailing Massie's position on the war. Here's Cut 15.
America is at war with a fanatical regime that seeks nuclear weapons. American hero Ed Galrine stands with President Trump, our country, and our military. Thomas Massie, he stands with Iran and radical leftists in Congress, opposing Trump, just like he did on the border and taxes. Now, Kentuckians have a choice: Galrine and Trump or Thomas Massie. The RJC Victory Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Now, the group running this ad has just put $3 million behind their campaign. What happens here in May? I don't know. But this is the first time Massie has ever faced the full wrath of Trump in a political campaign, and it is the first time he has faced an opponent with significant resources since he was first elected in 2012. Massie has had a strong brand heretofore among his voters in Kentucky, but this is a test like no other. We'll keep tabs on it for you as the race draws near. The primary is in May. Kentucky remains one of President Trump's best states. His support there, especially among Republicans, is rock solid. Now, let's get to the war in Iran, day 13 of Operation Epic Fury. The president says it's basically over. Listen to him last night, cut number 1.
You just said it is a little excursion, and you said it is a war. So which one is it?
Well, it's both. It's both. It's an excursion that will keep us out of a war, and the war is going to be I mean, for them it's a war. For us, it's turned out to be easier than we thought. But think of it, they had thousands of missiles, 7,000, 8,000 missiles. We got many of them before they got to launch. They have drones all over the place. We got many. Now we're knocking out the drone plants, as you know, we're going fast. They started talking about mines, so we hit 28 mine chips as of this moment, 28. Like using the same weapon, the exact same weapon that we use against the drug dealers in the water. We have, as an example, we had tremendous drugs pouring in through the waters, through the sea. And now we have almost none. It's down 97% through water. Now we'll do it through land. Land is easier than water.
For the United States military and our partners in Israel, this has been a crushing success. The Iranian Navy is destroyed. Their mine-laying ships, 28 of them, have been destroyed. The supreme leader is dead. The military command structure in shambles. Missiles and drone capabilities severely, massively degraded. And their ability to build a nuclear weapon, well, it's been set back by years, if not decades. For 47 years, folks, 47 years, Iran has been at war with America and all of Western civilization. They have threatened the Strait of Hormuz. They have funded terrorism from Beirut to Buenos Aires. They have chanted death to America while building the missiles to try and make it happen. And for 47 years, every president has kicked the can. But not this one, and not anymore. My advice, don't stop short, Mr. President. Finish them off once and for all. Iran's new leader, the son of the old one, says Iran will continue to attack vessels in the Gulf and keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. So there is still work to be done here against these fanatics. Let's talk about the economy. Good news to report. First, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has released the February inflation numbers. Core CPI, which is a statistic that is important. It does strip out food and energy. It came in at 2.5%. Let's listen to cut number 7.
If we strip out food and energy and come up with the core expected up 0.2, that's exactly where it comes out, up 0.2. Here we go with the year-over-year numbers. And zero progress, but not losing any ground. It remains at 2.4 on year-over-year headline. 2.4 really is, to find a lower number, you're going back to April of last year at 2.3. To find a higher number, you're at December of last year at 2.7. Just to give you some context there, now, in my opinion, the most important number, year-over-year core, remains at 2.5%.
Lowest core CPI since March 2021. That was before the Biden inflation bomb went off. And the International Energy Agency, of which 32 countries take part, they have agreed unanimously to release 400 million barrels of oil from their collective strategic reserves. That'll be the largest coordinated oil release in history. And oh, for those complaining about the U.S. strategic reserves being less than full, remember this, Republicans tried to fill it in 2020 when oil was $20 a barrel. Democrats blocked it, and they bragged about it. And the last release came in 2022 when Biden released oil ahead of the midterm to influence the outcome of the election. He never refilled it afterward either. In the Senate this morning, Republican leader John Thune announced the Save America Act will be put on the floor very soon. This is the bill requiring voter ID and proof of citizenship to participate in our elections. Here's Thune in cut number 12.
Mr. President, I can't guarantee an outcome on this legislation, but I can guarantee that we are going to put Democrats on the record, that they will be forced to defend their outrageous positions on these issues and explain to the American people why common sense and the Democratic Party have parted ways.
Now, my sources are telling me that this is unlikely to pass. The votes are not there to change the filibuster rules, but the debate will be had, and Democrats will go on the record, again, on the wrong side of another 80-20 issue. Let's get some news about aches and pains, folks. Since discovering Relief Factor last summer, it has been a revelation in the Jennings household. I can tell you from personal experience and from my father's experience, it is really making a difference. If you have daily aches and pains, it does make a difference. However, there's something new going on here. Relief Factor is always trying to improve the product, and they have made their formula even better. They have added a premium black pepper extract because it helps your body absorb the high-quality key ingredients more efficiently. In simple terms, it helps your body get even more benefit from Relief Factor that you're already taking. That really matters. So if you're going to take something daily, you want your body to use it as best it can. If you've been listening to me talk about Relief Factor for a while, maybe, hey, this is your moment. Or if you're already taking Relief Factor, now you're getting an enhanced formula designed to make it work even better. My advice is to start with the 3-week quick start plan. It's just $19.95. You do it by visiting relieffactor.com or by calling 1-800-4RELIEF. Ask yourself, how will it feel to be out of pain? You might get the answers from Relief Factor. When we come back, Democrats and the brainless morons in the leftist media are losing their minds over the Pentagon feeding our troops steak and lobster. You will not believe it. Stay with us for the details here on Salem. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, it's Scott, and I'm so excited to welcome Crowd Health as a new partner to the Scott Jennings Show. For several years, I'm hearing more people voicing frustration with traditional health insurance. Bad incentives baked into Obamacare have sent costs soaring. The rules are a maze of jargon, and people feel stuck. That's why I want to tell you about my new partner, Crowd Health. Crowd Health isn't insurance. It's a community that cuts out the middleman to help one another fund medical expenses, giving you more freedom, fewer surprises, and greater control over your healthcare choices. And when it comes to cost, members are spending hundreds less per month compared to traditional insurance. Right now, you can get started for just $99 per month for your first 3 months when you use the code SCOTT. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com and use code SCOTT. Again, joincrowdhealth.com, code SCOTT. Quick reminder, Crowd Health is not insurance. You can opt out, take your power back, and that is how we win.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Breaking news into the Scott Jennings Show. We're monitoring a situation here. CBS Detroit and now other news outlets are reporting that law enforcement, a heavy law enforcement presence, as I see it on my screen here, is responding to an active shooter situation at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Temple Israel is on Walnut Lake Road, and according to its website, is the largest Reform synagogue in the United States. You have West Bloomfield Police, the Oakland County Sheriff, and Michigan State Police all on the scene. But again, it is an active shooter situation at a Jewish synagogue in West Bloomfield, Michigan. We'll keep tabs on it throughout the show. All right, moving on now, and we have to talk about what happened on CNN last night and what is happening all over left-wing media today. There is a report out from a watchdog group called Open the Books showing that the Pentagon spent a bunch of money on food in September. Lobster tail, ribeye steak, king crab, ice cream, the usual end of fiscal year spending that happens under every administration. This is how the federal budget works. The food, by the way, is for the roughly 2 million troops stationed at bases all over the world. And specifically, the steak and lobster is for the troops who are currently at war in the Middle East. But my dear friend and fellow CNN contributor Paul Begala and I were debating on CNN about this last night, and he went on television and with a straight face said that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth had bought millions of dollars worth of lobster to eat himself. You have to take a listen to cut number 9.
He has spent $15 million in 1 month for ribeye steak, $6.9 million for lobster tail, $225 million for furniture. He spent more in the month of September than most countries on earth spend in their defense.
Paul, do you believe
all for himself? Lobster tails?
Do you believe
while our troops are eating MREs?
No. Do you believe the Secretary of Defense is personally eating all the lobster?
Well, he can't eat 16.
Troops.
Oh, really? The troops are getting lobster
frequently in theater.
Oh my God!
Troops who are going to war.
Oh my God!
Great meal. You know that.
They're getting lobster. You are so full of it.
You're going to get killed over this. Internet, do something.
Okay, you heard me there saying, Internet, do something. And within 45 minutes, the Internet, and specifically the X platform, had in fact done something. Here's the truth about this story. The steak and the lobster are routinely served to the troops, especially troops who are in the theater of war. And numerous videos today have popped up showing troops eating steak and lobster. Now, Paul Begala is hardly the only Democrat who has gone out in the media and made an absolute fool of himself on this story. You've had everybody from late-night comedians like Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and Seth Meyers. You've had members of Congress, people who ought to know better, by the way. They know how this works. You've had every Democrat pundit, all the usual moronic talking heads tweeting and posting about this all day long. They want you to believe that the Secretary of War bought millions of dollars of lobsters and steaks and personally consumed it himself. That is their talking point, if you can believe it. That is the best the left can do today. But if you spent more than 3 or 4 seconds on Google or Free Spoke or any other search engine, you would find out that it is a long-standing military tradition to feed our troops steak and lobster. There are a number of veterans who've taken to the social media platforms today to report how they, in fact, ate steak and lobster and crab legs. There are a number of troops who are in theater now who have posted videos of their own steak and lobster meals. What are we to conclude from all this? Well, first of all, the left, the media left, the political left, the left in general, is extraordinarily dishonest, cynical, and partisan. They think you're too stupid to know that it is long-standing military tradition to feed the troops. Number two, this shows you the extreme disconnect between the left and the Democratic Party and our military. It is amazing that 13 days into a war, you see people rooting for America to lose, rooting for bad outcomes, and now they have moved to the talking point that we should not be feeding our troops steak and lobster, the people putting their lives on the line, because we need a political talking point. It's absolutely outrageous. It is dishonest. It is cynical partisanship at its worst. And it shows the absolute brainless depravity of the American left right now as they rage against anything that has to do with Donald Trump. We'll take a break. More news and information after this. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Hey, it's Scott Jennings. You know, I've been thinking about universities. In most cases, they're kind of a bad deal. 6 figures of debt for a bachelor's degree that signals less every year. 4 years spent navigating ideological rules instead of learning how to think. Grades are inflated, standards are lowered, dissent is punished. We call it higher education, but it's mostly expensive daycare with a credential attached. The University of Austin, also known as UATX, however, is different. Admissions at UATX are based on test scores alone. No essays, no resumes, nobody cares who your parents know. If you're smart enough, you are in. UATX students turned down Chicago. They fled Barnard to complete a demanding great books core, including Aristotle, Shakespeare, de Tocqueville, alongside real math, science, economics, and AI. Classes are small. Professors actually know your name. Grades aren't padded. Excellence is measured and rewarded. From day one, students work directly with top founders, investors, and institutions, building companies, doing serious research, and landing real internships. And here's the part that changes everything. There is no tuition. Let me repeat, no tuition. Thanks to private donors, every UATX student graduates debt-free. That means when you come out, you're free to take risks, start companies, and build a life instead of paying off loans for years. If you want an empty credential, well, look elsewhere. If you want a serious education that actually prepares you to lead, I want you to apply to the University of Austin. Visit uaustin.org. That's UAUSTIN.org. Do it today.
When he's not in the Oval Office or owning the libs on CNN, he's here with us. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Thursday, March the 12th, Common Sense for the American People, and we are tracking breaking news. I reported to you just a moment ago. In West Bloomfield, Michigan, there is an enormous police presence. We're seeing video now. All sorts of police and emergency agencies are responding to a synagogue in West Bloomfield, Michigan. It seems that an active shooter situation is underway. It seems now that reports are a car was driven into a building at this synagogue, and that this synagogue does have a school. We don't know anything about injuries at the moment. We don't know much beyond what I have told you, other than this is happening in West Bloomfield. And if you look at what's happening, you see just a crushing police presence of response that ought to tell us something. We'll keep tabs on this story and bring you details as they come in, but we'll pray for the folks at the synagogue there in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Joining me now to discuss what's going on in Iran, one of the founders of an organization called the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and the current president. His name is Cliff May, and we're going to talk about the war and some of his personal insights into this conflict. Cliff was actually in Iran when this all started 47 years ago. Cliff, welcome back into the Scott Jennings Show.
Great to be with you. I'm a huge admirer of yours, Scott.
Well, we're grateful for you and other folks affiliated with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. They've offered their expertise on the show, and we're glad to have your experts anytime. I do want to start with this steak and lobster story. It's tied up in the war, of course. You heard me reporting on this a few minutes ago. The Democrats and the left and the media have decided that Pete Hegseth was wrong to keep up this military tradition of feeding the troops well as they are in the theater of combat. You've been watching this unfold. What are your thoughts?
Well, I heard your arguments, and I got to say that the idea that there's a scandal over steak and lobster is a nothing burger.
Good.
I also want to say, my father served in the South Pacific during World War II. My son was a Ranger-tabbed paratrooper. He spent a lot of time eating MREs. For those who don't know, that means meals ready to eat. I have sampled these. I'd rather have a salad.
If you just go on the internet and look up articles about this, there's reporting, lots of reporting, about how we routinely feed the troops steak and lobster on certain days. Particularly when they are deployed, and particularly when they're deployed in the theater of war. There's a military.com article, in fact, from just a few days ago about how the troops were in the Middle East getting their steak and lobster. You know, what kills me about this story is the two things: the willful attempt to mislead the American people about what's going on here, using a serious situation, which is our war effort, but then how quickly the narrative on the left spreads. When they want to drive a false narrative, they can do it almost instantly. And you see the narrative begins, and every politician, every late night host, every pundit, everybody who is a mouthpiece for the left, they salute, they get on it without question. They don't even stop to think about whether they're making fools out of themselves, which is what happened to me with my debating partner last night on CNN. You sort of have to marvel at the ruthless dishonesty that they deploy on stories like this, Cliff.
The ruthless dishonesty and the extraordinary organizational abilities from a communications perspective to say this can be the scandal of the day, this can be how we bring disrepute to the effort to defang an enemy of the United States. And that has been an enemy for 47 years.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm also hearing a lot of left pundits and left politicians continue to say things like, well, you know, we've got no idea why we're fighting Iran. We've heard no rationale about why Iran might be a problem. We don't even really know what we're doing over there, which, again, is also extraordinarily dishonest on two fronts. The President, Secretary of State, Secretary of War have all been very clear about what we're doing. But number two, and as you well know, because you were there as a young reporter, we've been at war essentially with Iran for 47 years because they've been at war with us. Tell us about your experience there.
Well, yes, to your point specifically, death to America began to be shouted really at the end of 1978, but certainly in 1979. In January, the Shah left. In February 1st, I believe it was, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned to Iran. I came there a few days later. Death to America is a declaration of war. Think about it. Now, the first act of war, I would say, came later in 1979. That would be in November, when our embassy in Tehran was seized and our diplomats were taken hostage and held for 444 days. That is an act of war. It was not the last act of war. Another one followed 4 years later, 1983, in Beirut, when this regime orchestrated the slaughter of several hundred American peacekeepers. There have been acts of war continually over that time. This regime armed, instructed, and funded Shia militias during the war in Iraq, killing over 600 American military personnel. More than 1,000 people have been killed. They've attempted assassinations and succeeded in some cases, and kidnappings in Europe and America. There's no statute of limitations on this. We don't have to say what we have said at various times is, well, we will respond at the time of our own choosing. You may remember President Obama said that after an attempt to assassinate the Saudi ambassador at a very swanky restaurant in Georgetown here in Washington. In other words, Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, not the people of Iran, have declared a war, have been waging a war for years. We are now responding to it in an effective way for the first time. And I'll just mention one more thing, Scott, here. Yep. Presidents from George W. Bush, Barack Obama, they've all said this regime cannot have nuclear weapons. None of them have done anything to prevent that. The JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was not a plan, it was not comprehensive, it involved no action, of President Obama, the Iran nuclear deal, would not have prevented the development, the acquisition of nuclear weapons. At most, it would have delayed that until President Obama was out of office. In other words, kicking the can, and supplied billions and billions of dollars to the regime to use to fund its terrorist proxies, including Hezbollah, the Houthis, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hamas.
That voice you're hearing, Cliff May, he's the head of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Cliff, let's get caught up here on the news of the day in this war. 13 days in, there's no doubt the U.S. military and the Israeli military have had amazing success. We are dealing with this issue in the Gulf there in the Strait of Hormuz. The new leader of Iran says that the attacks in the Strait of Hormuz will continue. Actually, let's listen to this. The president talked a little bit about this yesterday when he was in Kentucky, because Iran is now saying they're going to put mines out there to try to further target vessels going through the strait. Here's the president in cut number 3.
They started talking about mines, so we hit 28 mine ships as of this moment, 28. Using the same weapon, the exact same weapon that we use against the drug dealers in the water.
Cliff, talk to us about the Strait of Hormuz. Talk to us about the mines. And, the way the average American is going to feel this is, of course, in the disruption of oil logistics that flow through there. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely right. So this is enormously consequential. The president is doing what he can to stop the mining of the Strait of Hormuz, which is an international waterway. Freedom of the seas is one of the oldest of international laws. Either the U.S. enforces it or nobody does. If we allow, at the end of this exercise, for this regime to exist and to have control of that waterway, that will be a very bad thing. They'll say when ships can go through and when ships can't go through, kind of like what the Houthis have done for the Arabian Sea and the Suez Canal and that strait there called the Bab el-Mandab. If the U.S. has control of the Strait of Hormuz at the end of this exercise, that will be hugely important. We can say, properly so, we are enforcing freedom of the seas to keep this open, to make sure the international economy is good. By the way, Xi Jinping and Beijing will understand what that means. The oil he depends on, it's not oil for America. That we don't depend on oil coming through that. The oil he depends on his good relations with the U.S. Hugely important. Now, you not need to get rid of the missiles. You need to get rid of the drones. You need to get rid of the various ships that drop mines. They can drop mines off dhows too, but that tends to close the strait entirely. What they're trying to do now is let ships go through with oil for China, but not for anybody else. We should control the Strait of Hormuz at the end of this exercise. It's worth $3.50 gasoline for a few weeks to do that.
Cliff May with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. They'll give you the last word on this. I think the average American is looking at this and saying, yeah, I get it. The Iranians are bad. And I get it that we can't permit them to have these offensive weapons and nuclear missiles. But I need to hear how we are going to end this and what is the definition of victory here. In your mind, how should the president define that? When should he tell the American people that we have met our objectives?
Well, he can say at the point at which this regime is defanged, has no offensive military capabilities, no defensive military capabilities, doesn't need those, has no enemies if it doesn't threaten its neighbors. He could say it then. I'd rather he go further. That's hard, I understand, for all kinds of reasons, whether it's, as you say, Democrats saying, yes, but what a scandal, lobster and steak has gone to our troops, or whether the price of gasoline is $3.50 a gallon on average. But I would like to see this regime decisively defeated. When you don't decisively defeat a regime, then the war continues. That's the way you get endless wars. When you allow your enemy to get up off the mat, go back to his corner, get a drink of water, wash up, and come back and fight you again. We had unconditional surrender in World War II. Germany and Japan became our allies. We had an armistice with the North Koreans. That meant that war never ended. We still have troops in South Korea, 28,000 currently, and they now have, because of diplomatic failures by President Clinton and others, nuclear weapons and increasingly sophisticated missiles to deliver them. That's the problem.
Cliff May, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, thanks for joining us. We're going to continue to draw upon your expertise and the expertise of the excellent team you have at the FDD. We're going to continue following this breaking news here on the Scott Jennings Show. It is in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Police are calling it an active situation. A car crashed into the Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan. It's the largest Reform synagogue in the United States. There is a school at this synagogue. There's also reports that the car has caught fire. There's a massive police presence. Some are calling this active shooter. The details are obviously still coming in and perhaps changing by the minute. Here at the Scott Jennings Show, we're going to continue tracking this story for you for the rest of the day. We don't have any information yet on anyone who's been injured or what is happening inside this building or inside this temple or even inside the school. I am looking at images right now. I see smoke billowing from the top of a building, so we'll pray for the people who are inside. A quick word, and we're going to talk to the head of the IFCJ here in just a moment, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. They're helping out in the Holy Land as Operation Epic Fury rages on. They're supporting Israel's most vulnerable, the sick, the elderly, the children, and the families. They depend on the fellowship at times like these when they are under threat. If you would like to join them in prayerful support, go to supportifcj.org, supportifcj.org. Yael Eckstein with the fellowship is coming up next, an important conversation you don't want to miss here on the Scott Jennings Show.
You know, gold and silver recently soared to record highs and then pulled back. So are precious metals still a good buy? Many Wall Street experts predict higher prices ahead. Why? Well, because we still have trillions in national debt, a declining dollar, and inflation that keeps shrinking our savings. Even with corrections along the way, gold remains a historical hedge for wealth protection. That's why Morgan Stanley's chief investment officer ditched the 60-40 stocks and bonds portfolio and is recommending up to 20% in precious metals. They're getting educated, and you should too. Call Lear Capital at 1-800-880-2424 for your free gold investment kit and learn how you could qualify for up to $20,000 in bonus gold. Lear Capital has over $3 billion in transactions and thousands of 5-star reviews. Call 1-800-880-2424, 1-800-880-2424, or visit learscott.com.
The very definition of never back down. Here's Scott Jennings.
It is Thursday, March the 12th. Breaking news here on the Scott Jennings Show. The Jewish Federation of Detroit is asking all Jewish organizations to go into lockdown protocol. FBI personnel now on the scene with other police agencies in Michigan responding to the apparent vehicle ramming and active shooter situation at the Temple Israel Synagogue in West Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Now, according to the website of this temple, the school there was not in session today, and no activities or events were on the calendar until 1:30 today, so you would hope and pray there was a limited crowd at the facility. The Temple Israel's website says it is the largest Reform synagogue in the nation. But based on the images we're seeing right now, a car rammed into a building. It's also being called an active shooter situation. We see some smoke coming out of a building, and we see a massive police presence here at the Temple Israel in West Bloomfield Township, Michigan. We're going to keep an eye on this story for the rest of the afternoon. My next guest here on the show, the president and global CEO of a company that you often hear us talking about here on the show, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, an important organization that does amazing work around the globe. I'd like to welcome into the Scott Jennings Show, Yael Eckstein. She is the president and global CEO of the IFCJ, our great partners here at Salem and at the Scott Jennings Show. Yael, welcome in, and we're glad to have you today.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for this, and as you know, we talk about you often here on the show. Tell us what is going on in the Holy Land right now with the people that you support. You all provide all sorts of aid, critical aid, to people, but kind of give us an idea of what you're doing and what IFCJ personnel are seeing in Israel as Operation Epic Fury continues.
Well, we've been on the ground since this war began almost 2 weeks ago in every single city. And it's unique what's happening the past 2 weeks because I don't think there's anyone in the entire country of Israel who isn't affected by this. We've had Iran launch ballistic missiles at Israel and drones, and Hezbollah join yesterday. There were over 200 rockets launched by Hezbollah. I live in northern Israel, right over my town. And so there's no one that's not affected. And so what we do at the fellowship is we look at the people who would otherwise not have the care that they need, that they feel forgotten and neglected. And what we're seeing now is that it's the elderly who are suffering the most. We heard that there were a lot of caregivers who aren't showing up to these elderly homes since the war began. So for 2 weeks, I haven't had anyone to do shopping for them or to cook for them. And I've been on the field. I went to a woman's house, 92 years old, and her caregiver hasn't shown up. Her windows were cracked from rocket attacks. And when I came in, she started crying from joy. And I brought her the food and prepared meals and food boxes. And as I was unpacking these food boxes, a siren went off that this is the reality. All of us here are putting ourselves in danger to let the people of Israel know that they're not alone.
And for our audience around the United States, in order to help this effort, supportifcj.org. That is the website, supportifcj.org. We have people in Israel right now, and as you mentioned, elderly, vulnerable, sick, children, people with young children. Give us an idea, Yael, how often are you hearing these sirens? How often are you having to scramble into bomb shelters where people desperately need this help?
Well, I am one of the really lucky ones. I feel so blessed that I have a shelter in my home. I have 4 children, and last night we had 4 sirens throughout the night, which means we try to go to sleep and the air sirens start blaring and our phone starts beeping and we have 60 seconds to make it into the shelter, to get our kids and make it to safety. And for people that don't have a shelter, this is one of the most difficult things. And so the fellowship is actually placing mobile shelters across Israel. These are shelters that are made with a lot of concrete in a factory, and then they're put on the back of a truck, and with a crane, they're lifted up and put down in the most vulnerable areas where there are children and elderly. quickly. And actually, 2 days ago, we placed half a dozen of these shelters in central Israel, and every single one of them was used within 1 hour.
Wow. Yael Eckstein is the president and global CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. If you want to support our Jewish brothers and sisters who are living with this terrorism from Iran, living with this terrorism and rocket attacks from Hezbollah, here's what I want you to do. Go to supportifcj.org. Pray for the people of Israel. Support the IFCJ. They need our support right now as the United States and Israel face down this terrorism. Yael, thank you for coming on. We'll have you back. We'll keep talking about the fellowship, and we pray for you and pray for the work that you're doing. Another hour is ahead. Breaking news on the Scott Jennings Show. We'll have details right after this.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
All right, it's Thursday, March the 12th, and we are tracking breaking news here on the Scott Jennings Show on Salem. I'll tell you what we know. There has been a car rammed into the Temple Israel Synagogue in West Bloomfield Hills Township, Michigan. West Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Make sure I get that correct. It's a suburb of Detroit. A car was rammed into a building. This situation was described as an active shooter situation. Law enforcement sources are now telling CNN that the suspect here is dead. We don't know how the suspect was killed. We don't know if that was police. We don't know if that was from the car being rammed. We don't know if that was from suicide, but we do believe law enforcement telling CNN that the suspect is dead. We also have no details on what's going on inside. I'm looking at some images right now. I see smoke coming out of the synagogue. There is a school at the synagogue, and one law enforcement source did say there were quite a few people on this campus. It's a rather large campus. The Temple Israel is the largest Reform synagogue in the United States. So we're talking about a fairly large facility here. But again, the breaking news is that someone rammed their car into this temple. There is a school there. It was described as active shooter. You had state police, local police, and the FBI on the scene, and now we're hearing that the suspect is dead. We don't have any information about possible injuries on the inside of the synagogue. We will keep tracking this for the rest of the hour. Also, 2 people were injured this morning in a shooting on campus at Old Dominion University, this in Norfolk, Virginia. The shooting took place shortly before 10:49 a.m. A gunman opened fire in Constant Hall, which has classrooms and lecture halls. We don't know who the injured parties are, but we do know that the shooter was neutralized by the police, and we know the gunman in Norfolk there is dead. A scary scene on campus at Old Dominion University this morning. And one bit of legislative news, a moment of bipartisanship in the Senate this morning. On an 89-10 vote, a housing bill has passed the Senate. It was sponsored by Elizabeth Warren and Senator Tim Scott. The bill aims to boost housing supply and prevent Wall Street from buying up single-family homes. So this goes over to the House for action, but we did see some bipartisanship in the United States Senate this morning. New analysis from the Congressional Budget Office has found a lot of spending, massive amount of spending on gender treatments and surgeries for minors over a 5-year period. And returning to the Scott Jennings Show today, our friend and intrepid reporter Ben Ryan is here. You can find all of Ben's writing on his Substack, and I encourage you to visit it and subscribe at benryan.substack.com. Ben, you are looking at this Congressional Budget Office analysis on the Children's Health Insurance Program. Tell us what you have found out about these numbers. I think the data is rather shocking.
Right. Thanks for having me, Scott. So it's CHIP, Children's Health Insurance Program, as well as Medicaid. The Congressional Budget Office found in a recently released report that over a 5-year period ending in 2023, that the government spent $135 million in taxpayer funds on gender transition treatments and surgeries for minors. That includes puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries which are largely mastectomies in minors.
Yeah, this sounds, over $100 million. And so this is taking place between 2019 and 2023. What does this data tell you about how common these treatments were among minors on Medicaid during this period?
Right. One thing to note is that puberty blockers themselves were extremely expensive. So that's the bulk of the spending that we see here. This report didn't give actual numbers, it gave rates. So, for example, over an average of this 5-year period, about 1.4 per 1,000 17-year-old biological girls were taking testosterone by that age. And the rate was about half that for biological males taking estrogen. Now, similarly, a nonprofit advocacy group called Do No Harm, which opposes these types of treatment, they did an analysis that came out in October of 2024, and they found very similar patterns of what ages the children were using these drugs, puberty blockers versus cross-sex hormones. And they estimated that $120 million had been spent by private insurers during that same 5-year period, and that 14,000 minors had received either these treatments, surgeries, or both. So we can guess that that figure, considering that we also need to add the Medicaid on top of that, is likely pretty large. And one thing I really want to point out is that it looked like puberty blocker rates were pretty low across the age range from 9 to 17 that they analyzed, because puberty can start as young as 9. But where we really saw usage swoop up was around the age of 14 for natal girls and 15 for biological boys. So what this suggests is that the narrative that you always hear about these treatments is that they're there to prevent the wrong puberty is really largely misplaced. It's really only a fraction of minors who get these drugs who are getting them at the immediate onset of puberty. The most common minors who receive these treatments are natal girls who start them at the end of or after they finish puberty. So really that changes the frame of the question is, so what is exactly the rush if you've already completed puberty anyway?
I know some of the people who've looked at your reporting here, Ben, were sort of shocked at the number of double mastectomies among teenage girls. Yes. Tell us what the data says about how common that particular kind of surgery had become.
It's a lot less common than receiving these drugs, maybe a tenth as common. But Lear Capital, who studies pediatric general medicine at the Manhattan Institute, he's done a non-peer-reviewed analysis, and he found that about 1,000 natal girls per year were getting mastectomies for a gender transition during recent years. Now, after about 2024, state bans started to come in place. 27 states have banned these practices, and the Supreme Court validated those bans, found they were not unconstitutional in 2025. So now about half the country has banned this, and the Trump administration is going full bore to attack this industry in the remaining blue states, and is threatening many hospitals with revoking all of their Medicaid funding. So a lot of the big clinics are starting to close. We're seeing in New York State, Mount Sinai, NYU Langone, but then Tish James, who's the state AG, Attorney General, she's threatened to sue those hospitals. So they're really in a pickle about whether they're supposed to obey the state AG, who they probably side with, or the threats from the Trump administration.
And Ben, at a policy level, we've seen some of the large medical organizations in the United States begin to move away from this, begin to change their posture, the plastic surgeons, the AMA. What can you tell us about that? I assume what you're going to find out here and what we'll know is that after 23, where this data set ends, and because of the changes you're mentioning, and now because of the other people moving away from this, other organizations, we're going to see a massive drop-off on this. You agree with that?
Absolutely. We already started to see that in the Do No Harm data, that in 2023, in the blue states where these treatments were still legal, there was a drop-off pretty consistently from state to state. We don't know why. It could be a drop in demand, or it could be that physicians are concerned, for example, about lawsuits and becoming more cautious. And so as for the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, last month, they announced a long-awaited stance on surgeries for minors. They said that they are opposed to them, given the weakness of the evidence, and that practitioners should wait until youth are 19 years old. Now, 19 also happens to be the age that the Trump administration prefers for banning these treatments, or effectively banning them by threatening to withhold Medicaid funding. So that's an interesting parallel between those two figures, and whether or not there were politics involved. But right after the ASPS announced that policy and also said that they were concerned about the evidence base for these treatments, the American Medical Association said that they essentially agreed with the ASPS, and that it, in general, is better to defer until age 19. But as for all the other major medical associations, such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, they seem to be holding firm, at least at this time.
Interesting. Well, we'll see what they do in the future. It seems like we're having a bit of a shift here on it, but not everybody has moved just yet. That voice you're hearing is Ben Ryan. He's one of the best reporters out there on this and other topics, and I highly encourage you to look for his writing on his Substack at benryan.substack.com. Ben, we appreciate always your fact-based reporting, your straightforward reporting, and we look forward to having you back on the Scott Jennings Show.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
All right. When we come back, we're going to continue to follow the breaking news out of Michigan. There was an attack on a synagogue in Michigan, and it appears the suspect is dead, and now law enforcement sources are telling CNN there have been no other injuries. Thank God. We're going to track this through the commercial break and come back with it. I do want to give you a quick word from Relief Factor. Since discovering Relief Factor in the Jennings household, the word is this: we like it, and it works. I'm going to tell you about my dad, no spring chicken, but he's hopping around like one, and it's because he thinks he's taking Relief Factor every single day. He's playing golf. He's enjoying his retirement. In fact, he and I are going to take a little trip together this weekend, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, while we're on the road. But if you're having daily aches and pains, honestly, you have nothing to lose here. It's $19.95. They have this thing called the 3-week quick start. You try it. You see if it works for you. I think you'll like it. Here's how you do it. Go to relieffactor.com or call 1-800-4RELIEF. How would it feel to be out of pain? Well, you might find out from Relief Factor. When we come back, more on this breaking news out of Michigan and other stories on the Scott Jennings Show. Stay with us.
Fighting the left with the best weapon we have, common sense. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Thursday, March the 12th. We're tracking breaking news here at the Scott Jennings Show. 2 unfortunate incidents to tell you about and update you on. The gunman, the suspect, the assailant against the synagogue in West Bloomfield Township, Michigan, is deceased, and some law enforcement is saying that the suspect here is badly burned. So a car rammed into a synagogue in West Bloomfield Township, just outside of Detroit, Michigan. That person is dead. There are no other injuries reported at this moment, thank goodness, but the suspect is dead, so we're tracking that one. And this morning there was a shooting at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. We're now hearing that both the suspect and one victim in that shooting is dead. We don't have any details on the shooter or the victim, but we're now hearing that one of the victims that was shot in this attack is dead. So 1 killed, 2 injured at Old Dominion. The suspect is dead in West Bloomfield, Michigan, and we are tracking down details and tracking all the breaking information on all of these incidents. Here on the Scott Jennings Show, we're also tracking other news today, and to do a story out of New York City, I'm welcoming in the Vice President of Communications at the State Policy Network, Brooke Medina. Brooke has an article in the Washington Examiner. The title is Champagne Socialism is Forced to Raise Its Glass to Economic Reality. Brooke, you're tracking what's happening with the budget under Socialist Mayor Mamdani in New York City. Tell us about it, Brooke, and welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Thank you for having me, Scott. And yes, the budget is something to behold there, not only because of its behemoth size. I'll note that it is actually $10 billion more than the whole state of Florida's budget, but because Mayor Mamdani just seems to like to do socialism cosplay. He likes to think and talk about ideals of really sticking it to the rich, but the reality is his budget proposal and what he's toying around with, which is a 10% property tax hike, are going to affect everyday New Yorkers as well as Americans across the country who subsidize 55% of New York City's revenue.
Brooke, it seems to me that Mamdani ran on bringing rents down, but if you have a 10% property hike, a tax hike, what he's talking about in his budget, the opposite will happen. Rents will go higher, will they not?
That's correct, because that's how economics works. So despite the fact that he would like to tout out these talking points about making sure that it's only the wealthy that pay, the reality is that those costs inevitably get passed on to renters. And so those that are most affected are going to be lower to middle income New Yorkers, because property taxes are a regressive tax. It's going to fall heaviest on those who are least likely to be able to afford it. And that does include renters, which inevitably the landlords, because there are rent freezes, have to be able to pass on the costs in other ways. And those that are not beholden to the rent freezes, of course, will also be subjected to raising their rent prices in actual dollars.
Brooke, is it your opinion that everyday Americans outside of New York City would feel some of the fallout if Mamdani goes through with some of this in the city? Tell us how that might work.
Yeah, so what we found is that up to 55% of New York City's revenue is really subsidized by American taxpayers across the country through the various forms of welfare that go straight directly to New York City to subsidize their transportation, infrastructure, welfare services, or through the state of New York and then flowing through federal grant dollars. So again, what happens in New York actually has a ripple effect outside of the city, and it has a ripple effect through middle America. Rural Americans are footing this bill.
That's Brooke Medina with the State Policy Network. She has got an article in the Washington Examiner about what's happening with Mamdani and these crazy tax increases in New York City. The article is called "Champagne Socialism is Forced to Raise Its Glass to Economic Reality." Brooke, I hope folks will look you up on that. Thanks for coming on, and we'll have you back on the show in the near future. We're tracking breaking news here on the Scott Jennings Show. We're going to take a break, but the situations are twofold. One in Michigan, where a suspect rammed a car into a synagogue in West Bloomfield Township. The suspect there is dead. No other injuries are reported. There is a massive police presence at the synagogue there. At Old Dominion University, this is situation number 2, in Norfolk, Virginia, a gunman opened fire this morning, killing one person on campus, and then that person was neutralized by police. So a total of 2 people dead, the suspect and a victim at Old Dominion University. We're tracking all of this for you here on Salem. More on all this when we come back. Don't miss any of it here on the Scott Jennings Show. Stay with us.
If the leftists haven't had enough yet, there's more. This is the Scott Jennings Show. He's the author of the best-selling book, A Revolution of Common Sense. Here's Scott Jennings.
And here on Thursday, March the 12th, it is a breaking news edition of the Scott Jennings Show. We're breaking news in a couple of situations. I'll start with Michigan. You've been hearing us report on this throughout the day. A suspect in West Bloomfield Township rammed his vehicle into the Temple Israel Synagogue there, one of the largest Reform synagogues in the United States. And our friend at Fox News, Bill Maluzhin, is now reporting the following, that he has been told by law enforcement sources that the suspected shooter here, who did the ramming with the vehicle, was armed with a rifle, and he rammed his vehicle into the building, and he was then killed in a shootout with armed security at the synagogue. So the suspect is dead, killed in a shootout with armed security. We are told, and if you've seen any video so far, that the vehicle caught fire. You've seen some smoke coming out. That's from the vehicle fire. The suspect's body here is burned, and there is no ID yet on the suspect in Michigan. But the news is the suspect is dead. He was armed with a rifle. He was killed in a shootout with armed security. He rammed his car into the synagogue, and now his body is badly burned. We do not have an ID. We also don't have any reports of any other injuries at the synagogue. Let's hope that remains the case. Now, down in Norfolk, Virginia, here's the other situation. There was a shooting at Old Dominion University this morning around 10:49 a.m. A shooter went into a building, Constant Hall, where there are lecture halls and classrooms, and opened fire. 2 people were shot. One of those victims has died. So there is a deceased victim. Also deceased here is the shooter. I don't know how the shooter was killed, but the shooter is deceased. And our friend Carol Markowitz, who writes for the New York Post, has this report. This is Carol Markowitz's reporting. She says she is reliably informed that the alleged attacker at Old Dominion is Mohammed Jallow, And this is the same person who was previously convicted of supporting or providing support to ISIL or ISIS. That's Carol Markowitz reporting. So we have a little bit more knowledge of the suspect in Old Dominion. We have nothing on the suspect yet in Michigan, other than that he is dead after a shootout with armed security. You're listening to the Scott Jennings Show, Common Sense, with breaking news here on Salem. Joining us now, an incredible guest. Absolutely incredible conversation. Someone who can speak to the heart of what is happening in Iran. Our next guest was a refugee to the United States amidst the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. She was the U.S. State Department's first Iranian-born envoy. She is a senior fellow at the International Women's Forum. She's a former State Department special envoy under President Donald Trump. We welcome into the Scott Jennings Show, Ellie Cohan. Ellie, thank you for being here. You were born in Iran, and you fled with your family during the Iranian Revolution. You were 6 years old in 1979 when this happened, when your family fled after the current regime took power. Tell us, what are your recollections as a little girl? What was it like fleeing your home country and arriving in the United States?
Scott, thank you so much for your warm and kind introduction. What I can tell you is that it was certainly scary. I have memories of the revolution unfolding in Tehran, specifically the rioting in the streets and bullets piercing through my cousin's bedroom window. And all of this happened very quickly. And Scott, I think what's most interesting for the audience is to understand that before the revolution under the Shah, when I was born in Iran, Iran was a pro-Western country, had full diplomatic relations with the United States and Israel, and women had rights. My family, which is Jewish, we had rights as a religious minority. And that's the reason why, Scott, right now, when you talk to Iranians and there is so much hopefulness for what could come next, is because Iranians perceive this Islamic Republic regime as a 47-year anomaly in an ancient and proud history. And we believe that President Trump has now put this regime into the dustbin of history.
Let's hear from President Trump. He said this last night. Here's our president, cut number 2.
They are pretty much at the end of the line. Doesn't mean we're going to end it immediately, but they've got no Navy, they've got no Air Force, they've got no anti-air traffic, anything. They have no systems of control. We're just riding free range over that country. And now we're going to look very strongly at the Straits. The Straits are in great shape. We've knocked out all of their boats. They have some missiles, but not very many. I think we're in very good shape.
Ellie, you're a diplomat by trade. Obviously, we're all watching the military operation unfold here. Tell us about your feelings about what the United States and Israel are doing militarily, and also I'm interested in your views about what the people of Iran are going to do, because at the outset of this, the president said very clearly, I hope you rise up and take back your country, as you just suggested. Give us your thoughts on all of that.
Well, first of all, on the military angle, I think that Operation Epic Fury has exceeded all expectations in terms of how our great military, the United States, the greatest in the world, has carried out this operation, and also in partnership with Israel. It's incredible to see the strength of that bilateral relationship as these two great militaries together have, accomplished so much of what the objectives were that we were told at the outset, which was, getting rid of the remnants of the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, and their naval capacity, which at this point I think has been almost completely destroyed. So, the United States is ahead of where I think we forecast we would be at this point. And in terms of the Iranian people, Scott, what I'm tracking carefully is that what's getting less coverage is that amidst this incredible military campaign, the U.S. and Israel are also struggling striking Iran's repression apparatus. And so that is the part that I'm tracking very carefully. And what we're seeing is that we have struck their Basij militia bases, we've struck police stations, we have taken out some of their cyber capabilities. Yesterday, we took out the bank that pays the IRGC and the various militia. So that is all very important and interesting developments. And I would say yesterday, I also saw footage out of Iran that there were Israeli drones apparently that were actually attacking these, again, these Basij militia and the police on the streets as they were creating choke points and checkpoints to try to get in front of any protesters who might come out. So in terms of what the Iranian people might do next, we've seen the Iranian people by the millions come out into the streets to protest against this regime over and over again. I think that if we continue striking at the apparatus and making it impossible for this regime to murder Iranians wholesale using military force, as they did in this last round of protests, killing over 40,000 innocent demonstrators, I think we will see the Iranian people back on the street. But again, I think the more coverage that we can do to help them, then obviously the more chances of their success.
Ellie, I know you're also working on anti-Semitism efforts in the United States. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Deputy Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. It's obviously seeing a resurgence in the United States. You're working on this task force. What are your recommendations to our policymakers right now? And what are your recommendations to people who have a public voice? It seems to me that we all have a responsibility to call this out, to speak out against it, and to not look the other way. What are you seeing? What are you feeling? And give us your, from your perch on this task force, your recommendations on what we need to do as a nation here.
Well, Scott, when you and I were chatting offline before you brought me on air, I thanked you for your voice, and I really am so grateful to you, because on CNN, which is not a network that is often or all the time, I should say, friendly to the concerns of anti-Semitism in the country, you have been a steadfast voice. And so I want to share my personal gratefulness to you, and I hope that everybody would follow your lead to always speak out when you feel compelled, that you think that something might be morally wrong. In terms of my recommendations, I want to give a lot of credit to the Trump administration, because they've instituted a lot of recommendations that I've previously written about and published and spoke about, which is, I would say, number one, you want to have a zero tolerance approach to anti-Semitism. And that is something that is set, the tone is set from the very top and goes all the way through government. You also want to see from our federal government a whole of agency, a whole of government approach to combating anti-Semitism. And that's what we're seeing right now between the Department of Justice that took on the universities in the wake of October 7th and that heinous pro-Hamas movement that took over our campuses. You're also seeing it in the Department of Justice in terms of their prosecution of hate crimes. You're seeing it with the FBI right now. And that's, in the Department of Education that has also taken on the universities in a different way. So that is exactly what we want to see more of. Again, using every government power to attack this hatred in every way possible. Scott, I think the challenge that we're facing, and just to share a statistic, after October 7th, Jews faced a 400% increase in anti-Semitic incidents and attacks in the United States. It was unprecedented. And what we need to see more of is enforcement on the local level. Jews happen to live in Democrat-run cities and Democrat-run states where we see, in general, a lack of law enforcement. And so that puts the Jewish community at greater risk. So what we need to see is police empowered to use their capabilities to arrest when they deem fit. We need to see attorneys general who are willing to prosecute and not let people right back on the streets immediately after they've committed hate crimes, which we've seen in places like New York and Los Angeles over and over again. We need to see hate crimes prosecuted as hate crimes and identified as hate crimes. And we need to, again, from leadership, so now on the local level, you want your mayors, your governors to say that they will not tolerate anti-Semitism. There's no room for anti-Semitism. And I will tell you that in a place like New York City that has just elected Mayor Mamdani, we have not heard that clear moral voice in the fact that he won't condemn Iran, he wouldn't condemn Hamas. It's a real problem on the local level.
In New York City, the mayor has appointed every anti-Semite they can find to these offices in New York City. There's a tolerance for it, people who have said terrible things, and you're getting no real leadership out of him. Ellie Cohan, a diplomat, someone with real experience as we talk about Iran and talk about anti-Semitism. I'm so grateful for your time today. I'd love to have you back very soon to continue to comment on these important stories. Appreciate your time today. A quick word from our friends at Patriot Mobile. Patriot Mobile, these are our buddies. I know these guys. I trust these guys. They have a great company providing a great service, and they believe in what we believe in. They believe in Christian conservative values. They invest in this. They're running a cell phone company, but they're also investing in the cause, in your cause. Switching has never been easier. Take a stand. Invest in a company that is investing in your views. Go to patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT. Use promo code Scott and get a free month. patriotmobile.com/Scott or 972-PATRIOT. Make the switch today. More on our breaking news when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Straight talk without the bluster. When you positively need the truth, this is where you come. The Scott Jennings Show.
Let's go down to Norfolk, Virginia. That is where you find the campus of Old Dominion University. I'm bringing into the Scott Jennings Show Carol Markowitz. She's with the New York Post. Carol, this morning we had around 10:49 a.m. Someone went onto campus, went into a building and opened fire. We have one victim who is dead. I think we have one other victim who is injured, and the shooter is dead. And you are breaking news right now with us. You have the identity of the shooter at Old Dominion. Carol Markowitz, what can you tell us?
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on. So this was a story that really wasn't getting that much play. I actually have a friend who has 2 kids at Old Dominion, so when she posted about it this morning on Facebook, I started looking into it. The shooter's name, as I have it, is Mohammed Jallo. And what's interesting about him is that he has previously been convicted for giving information to ISIL, that's the name for ISIS, and he had been convicted of this, and he was in the Board of Prisons until 2024. He was released December 2024. He was arrested in 2016. So he had served some time for providing material support to a terrorist group. But now he allegedly was back on the streets and was able to carry out the Old Dominion shooting this morning.
This is shocking information. The suspect here, as you're reporting, Mohammed Baylor Jallo. I'm looking at the press release from the Department of Justice from Tuesday, July 5th, 2016. Former Army National Guard member arrested for attempting to provide material support to ISIL, or as you point out, that's what is called ISIS more commonly. He was convicted, and somehow he's out of jail and now apparently at a campus, and he went into a place called Constant Hall. Do you know anything about that building? We had heard earlier that that's where classrooms and lecture halls are located.
Yeah, there's not that much information about the Old Dominion shooting yet. I think they're just still on scene and figuring out what happened. But the fact that, I mean, I hate to say it this way, only 3 people were shot. It looks like it was 1 person is dead and 2 more were shot. Means that somehow the shooter was deactivated. So hopefully somebody was able to take him down, and I think that that's the story so far. I'll absolutely be updating as I hear anything else, but so far that's all the information out of Old Dominion.
Carol Markowitz is with the New York Post. You can find her on the X platform. She's updating this with breaking information here at Carol, at Karol. Carol, we've got about 30 seconds here. We're obviously tracking this story. There's obviously an extremist at play at Old Dominion. We don't know who the suspect is in Michigan. We have seen a radical Islamic extremist throwing IEDs in New York City. We saw a radical Islamist in Austin, Texas. Are you worried? Are we undergoing the beginnings of an epidemic of radical Islamic violence in the United States?
Well, absolutely, except I wouldn't say it's the beginning. I think that we're somewhere in the middle, hopefully, if not figuring out a way to get to the end, because this has been going on for so long. I'm from New York, and I remember 9/11 very well. This has been happening for some time. I think what we're doing in Iran is actually a reaction to that and not a new start to it. So, stay safe out there, be very vigilant, and keep your eyes open.
Absolutely. That's Carol Markowitz from the New York Post. Thanks for being with us on the Scott Jennings Show today, Carol, and all of you who've been listening. Breaking news thank you, Carol. Breaking news in Michigan. The suspect is dead at the synagogue there. The suspect is dead in Norfolk, Virginia. We have the identity. You can find that online now. Appreciate your time today. Stay with Salem for all the breaking news. See you tomorrow.